Hey, November 1, 2014. Welcome to the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum. My name is Glenn Madison, and today I'm talking to Vince Cipolla, longtime employee of the Southern Pacific. And that's about all I know about him, so maybe he can tell us about some of his experiences over the years.
Well, gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here this morning and to represent the Southern Pacific engineers, train crews, and railroad people that have worked in and out of this terminal. I first come up here in the early 70s when we went interdivisional, half coast crews, half San Joaquin crews into Los Angeles. So that what brought me up here the first time, to meet your people and to consolidate the operation of the Southern Pacific. Now, saying that, I'm a long-time employee of the Southern Pacific. I went to work May 9th, 1943 in Los Angeles. I left the roundhouse in 1945, December, and I went on the road as a fireman on the San Joaquin Division, Los Angeles to Bakersfield, over the hill. I am considered a hillman. I operate and I know how to work on Cuesta grade, and I know how to work on the San Joaquin Tehachapi grade. So, saying that, I was promoted to an engineer in 1951, July, and I worked right up the last 7 years as #1 locomotive engineer on the San Joaquin, which is a very prominent position because only a very few locomotive engineers ever moved to the #1 position. So I feel very honored to have this position, and for you gentlemen to ask me to come up here today to San Luis. We call it BI Telegraph. And at times I will slip, and I'll slip it in there, because when we come up here, we don't call and say this is West Extra San Luis Obispo Telegraph. We use the old telegraph, BI Telegraph, and they will answer. Now, your Cuesta grade, just for a little history run here, was instituted right after World War II started, is my understanding. May be corrected. But the control board was in Roseville. And when Roseville would call here, they'd call Roseville BI Telegraph. That's it. Because you could not run a train on the hill because all the controls of the CTC district to Margarita, Santa Margarita, was all under the aspects of the Roseville dispatcher. So saying that, I've worked several times over the hill, off a division, because just looking at my record, I'm a fully qualified engineer on all districts. So it's an honor for me to sit here today and represent the men that have gone before me and the men that are coming behind me. I'm not a young kid, but I've had some very interesting experiences, and I'll run a couple by you so you can kind of get the idea of what does an engineer do? What's his life like? Well, let's put it this way. I got married 52 years ago, and I told my bride, I says, honey, you run the house and I'll make the job work for me. And I says, we'll have a happy marriage. And that's the way it turned out to be. She run the house, raised the family, put the boy through college, and I've worked day and night on the railroad, which made me very happy because I've been a railroad fan since way back in the 30s when I first got on an engine. I said, oh my, my. And so, as you're called out of BI here, you don't know what you're running into, but the SP company is a very unique operation that a lot of people don't realize. They train you the way they want you by everyday operation. They don't watch you. They tell you what they are going to do, and they do it. And then you are told what to do, and you do it. And it's 100% book of rules operation of all the railroads in the United States, plus special instructions. So I'm going to take you down the line, and I think you'll enjoy this, and you can see the technology, if you want to put it in that form, or how they teach you to handle yourself under all conditions. So let's not linger here. You're going to chuckle a little bit, but it's the way the Southern Pacific trained us. Don't blame me. So let's go back in the early 80s, and I was called out of BI here on the Smoky. Now, you ask yourself, that's a strange name, but it's the East Perishable that is originating here. And all through Santa Maria Valley, Surf, Santa Barbara, Oxnard, you pick up perishable. Not loads of lumber, just perishable. And you form what they call a C block. Now we have, in that C block, you have the short east and the long east. And that goes from Los Angeles to Tucumcari, where half the train goes to Chicago, the other half goes to New Orleans. And the train is moving along, and it gets to be a hot block, just like a passenger train. And it's the vegetables and the food that you eat daily on your plate at home is handled by the Southern Pacific. So I'm on duty at 5:30 p.m. It's a night job. Train crew comes up. The power comes off the hill. It's coming from Watsonville. Take a quick service. And this is a Malley. So the Malley comes here, the BI, and then they put a diesel on it. I'm waiting at the depot for the power to come off the hill, and we have 3 big units, and we make a crew change at the depot. The conductor gives me his last instructions. He says we have 1 car at Oceana to pick up. We come in with about 7 cars, 8 cars, and crew gets on, and we're out of town at 5:45 or about. So now we're going against the evening traffic and what's coming off the road from Los Angeles. We got to meet these trains, so now we're on a schedule, timetable schedule, of first 8:34. Our first stop at Oceana, we had 1 car of lemons to pick up. The conductor said, and this is where they teach you, you don't run your power into a spur, because if you turn a rail over, you're all done. You will be isolated. So you reach in with your caboose and pick up the 1 car behind the caboose. So In doing that, we did as instructed. We reached in, pulled by, conductor gave us an easy backup. We backed in with a whole 7 cars to reach in and get these 2 cars behind the caboose. We come back out, everything just fine, line the switch, next stop Guadalupe. So we rang dangle over there and down the main line, got the caboose off in front of the depot with the 1 car that we picked up at Oceana. We picked up the Santa Maria, we go right to the Santa Maria Main, the interchange, and pick up their perishable. They were nice enough to switch it out, that we had the short east and the long east, and they give us, I'm not interested in how they build their train, I'm just telling you that they're building a train. So the thing is,
You want to stop it?
no. And so we're picking up our train, and the switcher puts our caboose where it belongs behind the train, and he makes this, and that's one of those things that that we need a little help along the way to expedite the move. Okay, now we go over the hill, and next stop is Surf. Well, now we got about 10 cars, 12, I don't know. And so we're moving, and we pick up some more out of Surf from the Lompoc Valley. And now we're slowly forming our trains, long east, short east. And in doing that, we'll take the difference of how many cars we pick up is how many cars we're going to reach in and get. See? In other words, we're holding a handle, as we call it. Well, okay, we stop at La Patera after we leave Surf. We got 2 cars of oranges at La Patera. Now, La Patera is, those who are familiar with the area, is just west of Santa Barbara. So we reach in there with the whole train again. And we pull the cars out. We don't have time to switch the cars and caboosing and this and that, because there again, the packing house is a long way from the main line. And there again, rules have it that you don't go in there with your engines if you can stay with a heavy equipment on the main line. So we get it. We go in and get our loads. Now we're coming back over, and we're coming out on the main line. We put our train together, and next stop, double track Santa Barbara. Well, now it's about 10 o'clock in the evening, and we're moving, and Santa Barbara, he called me, and he says, we're going to have a little delay. He says, we're waiting for a westbound. Well, okay. So we move on down to State Street, stop in the clear, and in front of the depot, and Operator Fisher comes out. He says, I got your orders. He says, you got 1 car at Carpinteria, Lemons. I says, all right. Now there again, the packing house is on the east end of Carpinteria. So now we go down there after the westman arrives, and he's running his train like he's got all night, and we got a schedule to keep, so we're moving right along. Out through Miramar, around Summerland, down through Ortega, and the next is beautiful downtown Carpinteria. Well, now they got a state park down there, and that state park has a big chain in front of it. Park closes at 5:30 p.m., 6 o'clock, and red lantern hanging on it. Nobody around. There's no entrance, no exits, no nothing. The road is closed. So I tell the head brakeman that I'm working with, and I said, I'm going to stop back to hole 1. And I said, we'll reach in there and get that very carefully because I have nothing to, I don't have a handle. All I have is my units. So we reach in very carefully, just barely snag the car and pull it out just as easy as we went in. So there's a couple minutes of relapse there, and come back out to the main line. There's a little rise in the track as it starts up over Wave and down through Punta. And so we stop back, and he lines the switch again for the siding, and he gives me a little kick sign, and I just give it a little boost, and it rolls up. And then while it's rolling up, he drops off with the switch, lines the switch, and here comes the car rolling free, back against the train. Well, he swings aboard, ties a quick handbrake, and he couples up to the train, drops down on the ground, laces the air, and he walks up, and he says, we're all set, so we make a quick air test. Now, the air test is back on the train. You set the air, and if the caboose air gauge goes down and it goes up, you've got continuity. So you can just, that's an air test with one car. So now I whistle off, and I'm waiting to depart, and I'm looking for a highball. No, I whistle off again, and I get a washout. Stop. So I sit there for a minute, and I whistle off again.
Now,
He gives me a slow back up.
This is from your conductor, who's at the rear
The
of the
conductor's passing the signals. And he's on the crossing, about 4 cars behind the engine, our units. And so I back up real slow. I thought something was, we're getting further instruction. Yes, we were getting further instruction. I never called him by name. I didn't say conductor, and he did not say engineer. He knows my name. I worked with him many times. And I said, are you holding for something? He says, we have the Carpinteria Police Department here, and they're going to tag us with a restriction, because the California state law says that you will not block a crossing more than 10 minutes. Now mind you, this is a chain, a red lantern, and a dead-end street into the state park on the east end of Carpinteria. Park is closed. This police officer steps up and he says, are you the engineer? I said, I'm running this engine, and I give him the number of the engine. And he didn't like that. He says, are you the engineer? Well, I said, I've been called a lot of things. I said, what's your problem? Well, he said, I'm going to give you a ticket. He says, come on down here. I says, wait a minute. A ticket for what? He says, blocking this crossing under the law. Well, I says, I respect the law. I said, do you know what you're doing? He looked at me, and he said, I'm going to give you a ticket for restricting this crossing. I said, young fella, I said, do you know what the law says about interfering with the interstate operation of a railroad train? He looked at me and he says, you're going to get a ticket. He says, come on down here. I said, no, sir. I'm the engineer. I cannot leave the seat of this. I said, this is a federal operation now. I said, you understand the law, what it says about the interstate operation of a train, and you're interfering with the operation? He says, that don't matter. Well, I turned to my brakeman. He's sitting on the engine wondering what the hell's going to happen. And I said, this fellow over here wants to arrest me. And I said, I'm not going to go along with it, because I know what I'm doing. So I quote the rules and the law. This is not local law. This is federal law. And today, as I'm looking at this interview It's still the law. There's only two people you do not arrest: an airline pilot and a locomotive engineer. It doesn't say a thing about the conductor, trainman, or brakeman. Nothing. That's the simple law of the land. How many times have you ever heard of a locomotive engineer going to jail? Well, I just got out of a seminar about a month ahead of this, and they run that by us very clearly. So I was pretty stubborn about it. So I closed the windows and I poured a cup of coffee, and the next thing I got a flashlight through my clear vision window shining in my face. So I opened the window a little bit and I says, "Sir," I says, "I can't see you, but will you turn that light off? It's shining in my face." He says, "You're under arrest." I said, "No." I said, "I'm under arrest." So I closed the window. Now this is bulletproof glass, but that's beside the point. I closed the window and I tell the brakeman, I said, "That fellow over here, I don't know who he is. He's a cop, I guess." And I said, he says I'm under arrest. I said, "I want you to go back out and get the control levers and the reversers out of those units back there and bring them up here and put them in my bag. When I go to jail, I'm going to isolate this train that nobody will move it. And I'll be in jail. Don't you tie up until I get to wherever I'm going and whatever I do. If it's 3 days from now, you do not tie up, because we went to work together and I know what I'm talking about. You will tie up when I tie up. If we go to work together, we tie up together." He looked at me, he says, "Okay." So there he goes. He comes back with 2 reversers and a handful of brake valves. I just put them in my bag. Well, in the meantime, this cop is going bananas because he's not getting his commands and he's not being understood. So I told him the second time, I says, "Officer, please get off this locomotive. You're trespassing and delaying an interstate operation of a train and an engine crew." I says, "Please get off it." He says, "We'll see about that." I says, "I hope you will." And he disappears. So we're sitting there. I asked the brakeman, I said, "Would you like a cup of coffee? This is going to get good before it gets better." I says, "So?" He says, "So that's it." So in a few minutes, conductor, he's up alongside the cab, and he says, "Engineer," he says, "we got 3 police officers here now." He said, "Do you want to come down?" I said, "No, I'm not allowed to come down by law and abandon my position as a locomotive engineer." He says, "They want to know what your license number is." I said, "Take it from the engineer, from the engine number and the indicators. That's my license." See, because when we go to work at BI, we sign a Federal Register. It don't say Southern Pacific on it. It says Federal Register. And that means the government, not the state or anyone else's. So now we're discussing that personally. And now we got 3 officers, 4 officers, and we got the captain of the watch. The time is burning. So when all this is going down, I pick up the radio and I call First 834 to Santa Barbara. I says, "This is the engineer on First 834. Fisher, how do you read me?" He says, "Loud and clear." I says, "Stay on the radio." Then I pick up and I go, First 834 engineer to Oxnard. I said, "How do you read me?" "Across the water. There's no interference." And he says, "You're coming in loud and clear." I says, "All right." I said, "Fisher, are you there yet?" He says, "Yes, sir." I says, "I want you to call the chief dispatcher. I want you to call the superintendent of the Los Angeles Division and tell them that their locomotive engineer is under federal arrest by the police in Carpinteria, and that his train is, and he's blocking the main line, and it will not move because I'm under arrest. So it goes dead. Now, the whole division's got this. They flip the key, and everybody listens. Says, who's that hoghead? Well, that's Cipolla. Well, I'll bet he wins. And they were taking bets on it, who's going to win and who's going to lose. So, now it's getting up about 1:30 in the morning. We've been there for almost 2 hours. And that's just the way I wanted it. Dock up all the time you can to this police officer. I'm going to teach him a lesson. So, in doing that, here comes the train master. Oxnard called me and said, we got our train master coming over there ASAP. I said, he'll be there shortly. Well, it's only about 20 minutes from Oxnard at that time in the morning. He was coming. And so he arrived, and he crossed over in front of me on this side, on my side, on the right-hand side. And I said, good morning. I said, were you called here purposely? He said, yes. He said, what's the problem? I said, step over between the main line and I'll come down off the engine. There was a reason. So he did, and I had the headlight on so he could see. We had plenty of light. I stepped out in the cab, but I did not hit the ground until I was between the track. Made sure I was on railroad property when I swung down to the ground. And this cop jumped right in. I said, keep your mouth shut, young man. You're in trouble right now. Well, then I scared him. He didn't know where I was coming from. And I asked the train master, I says, have you got a standard watch? He says, yes. I says, let's compare time. So I pull my watch out and I says, what time do you have? And then when I turned to the officer, I says, officer, you have a watch. What time do you have? He was almost a minute and a half off. See, running fast. Well, I says, let that go on the record, gentlemen. And so he says, well, he says, I want to know what's going on here. So anyway, a little conversation. I just keep quiet, see what's going on. And they discuss this. He says, what was the violation? The train master asked this cop. And he says, well, I am arresting this engineer. He's under arrest. This train's not going to move until he goes to jail. Well, then he said the fatal words. About that time, he gets a telephone call. Now it's the judge at the courthouse that's in bed in Santa Barbara. And I don't know what his jurisdiction is, but anyway, he straightened things up in a hurry. He told that police officer, he says, get that engineer in that seat and get that train out of here. He says, we will talk to you in the morning. So they all looked at each other, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. And he says, okay. I said, what do you mean, okay? And my train master's standing right there. And he started to say something. I said, hold it, hold it. I said, just hold it back. I said, let's see what this officer has to say. Well, he says, well, you can go. I said, no, go where? He said, well, you're released to go. I said, where'd you get that information? I was boxing him in every way I could. Well, he says, we got it from Santa Barbara. I said, well, your jurisdiction's here in Carpinteria. I'm setting him up really tight. And so he says, well, I'm telling you, you can go. He turned around and he told the other officers, well, we can go back on duty now. So they disappeared right quick. But he didn't. And he kept repeating that. You can go, you can go. Well, I says, let it be known we're still on railroad property. And I says, officer, you don't understand what you're doing. You arrested me. You have not mentioned that I am released from my rest. And he said, oh, well, he said, I don't know. I says, I do. I said, you've just violated the federal rules of the interstate operation of a train. Now you're going to have to explain that to the judge in Santa Barbara. I won't be there. So anyway, we cleared it all up. I pick up the crew and we rang the dangle and go over to Oxnard. I get to Oxnard, they got a message. On arrival Los Angeles, come to the yard office. I figured, well, that's all right. So anyway, we arrive in Los Angeles, change crews, and boogie. Now the train's about 3.5 hours late. The SP company did not like that because they've had their crews on duty. Everybody down the line has been on duty because the schedule of the train, and we did not keep the schedule. So I got in the carryall, and the brakeman was with me. The guy says, no, stay with me. I said, you're my backup. I said, I want you to tell them what you heard, and then I will tell them what I heard. And I said, we'll put the two together, because the terminal superintendent was there, the superintendent was in the office, everybody was in the office, and says, come on in, gentlemen, sit here, sit here. So we did. He says, that was quite an incident at Carpinteria. I said, yes, sir, sure was. He said, now let's clarify that. And here's a steno. She's taking it down word for word, just like I'm giving it to you. Now, a little variation because it's been quite a few years and a few words have been added, but the thought is there, that he was interfering in the interstate operation of a train. Well, anyway, the long and the short, I've got a copy of that. I asked for the steno. I said, would you give me a copy of that? She says, without problem. So I have that. Now, in the period of years, I've been asked many times, why don't I write a book on my life? And I've got some pretty good things, and they're all focused on railroading. And it's a very interesting thing. So that concludes that episode, and I hope I've showed you the factors of how the SP company trains us to handle ourselves in any kind of a situation. As the day wore on, we're called east out of BI, San Luis Obispo, and again, Smoky. First 834, that was the number, went with the Smoky. Scheduled and all. We picked up at Guadalupe, which is regular pickup off Santa Maria, and the local. They give us a train there, and we had a very short train. And so we get over to Surf, that's our next pickup, Long Poke, Pock, I guess, and we leave there, and of course the next thing, leaving Vandenberg, we go past the R-Light scanner. And the conductor called me up. He said, have you got any air in the train? I said, no. I put the train back. In a few minutes, he said, calling ahead in first 834, he says, Vince, he says, have you got any air in this train? I says, no. I sat there for a minute. I says, uh-oh, something's wrong. So I eased the throttle down real slow. I didn't use any air. I just moved it down and just shut it off, and we stalled. We rolled about 1.5 miles. But I knew something was wrong. Conductor called, he said, what did you stop for? I said, we're going to walk the train. Now we only had about maybe 16 cars, 17, it wasn't much. But we picked up 7 cars at Surf. Well, okay. Brakeman said, what are we going to do? I said, you're going to walk the train. And I said, find out what's going on. I said, you heard the conversation at the rear end. I said, just grab yourself, your radio, go for a walk. And he did. He walked to the first car behind the engine and he says, oh my God. I says, what did you find? He says, we have hot boxes. I says, what, hot boxes? He says, yes. Some genius at Longpog decided that he was going to steal the brass out of all of the journal boxes that sits on top of the weight of the car, the curved brass on the journals, lubricated. And they slipped in a piece of channel iron exactly the same size that would sit there, just sit there. And that's what he was smelling. He come up and he says, the whole pickup at Surf, he says, we're in trouble. I said, wait a minute. I said, are you telling me we got hot boxes and all the wheel sets? He says, yes. By this time the conductor's on the head end and he's ramping and raving. He says, good God, he says, we're in trouble. I said, wait a minute, gentlemen. I said, just a minute. So I picked up and I tried to talk to Surf, but he's over the hill and I can't get him. So I talked to Oxnard again, across the water. I says, Oxnard, this first 834, engineer Cipolla. I says, we got a problem over here at Arlight. I said, we just picked up a 7-car pickup at Surf, and we says, we're in trouble. I said, we have hot boxes on all our journals, and we need 14 sets, wheel sets, now. We need 14 wheel sets. Tell the superintendent, tell the car department, tell everybody, get those trucks going to Gaviota. Well, total silence. The next thing I heard on the radio, this is superintendent. What the hell's going on out there? And I said, some brilliant soul took all your journals brass out of the wheel sets at Surf and replaced it with angle iron, channel iron, you know, like this. Sits right on top of the journal. And so I said, we need the 14 wheel sets, and it says we're trying to make where you can get to it at Gaviota. Now I said, we're moving slow because we got a lot of hot boxes. Everything we picked up at Surf is in bad shape. Well, it lasted almost 4 hours from Arlight to Gaviota. We walked real slow, we just move slow. When they turn white, we stop. White as that paper. We stop. And when it starts to turn color again, then we start moving again. Well, they were worried about the passenger trains coming behind us and their daylight train is on time. So here we are moving very, very slow. And we're moving towards Gaviota. Well, we make Gaviota around 7:30 in the morning. It took us almost 4 hours to get over the road from where we were at Arlight down there, and we have to watch those. Don't drop a journal, for God's sake. Don't do anything wrong. And we just move very slowly. You don't dare put hot water or cold water on a hot box. You don't do that. We got there, and the roadmaster was there waiting for us, and he said, let me see. And he looked at it, and he says, gee, well, I won't tell you what he said. But we went in, and I said, we had our train, and we left it behind the switch. We took the head 7 cars and walked up and put it in the storage track. And we broke the cars where every car, you could back a truck in there and pick up the car with the jacks and we bring the wheel set out, put the new wheel set in, and set it off on the ground. Then you moved up and did the other one. Then you got to the end, you turn your truck around and go the other way. Well, I'm thinking, I'm setting this thing up, and I told him, I said, this is the easiest way to do it. Give yourself plenty of room, we'll work that way, and you can work this way, and we're gone. So, anyway, we left them there. As I understood, it only took them, I don't know where they got the wheels. I don't care where they got the wheels. But they had more maintenance away trucks you ever saw. I heard later that they had trucks and wheel sets coming from Watsonville all over the place. They had them coming to Gaviota. Well, we got over to Oxnard and they released us because we had our time against us. We were the hog law, hours of service. And that was into that. So naturally is we stopped and released. Again, past experience. When I got to Los Angeles, I went right to the yard office and I told the terminal superintendent, I said, George, I said, I'd like your girl to copy what I'm going to give her on this deal. He said, yeah, I heard. Well, everybody hears when something happens. On the railroad, you don't keep it quiet. And so they give me a steno again, and I reversed. I'm telling you everything I told them. And I've got that on record in my house today. Everything I backed it up because on the railroad, you better have some backup because there's always some wise boy that figures something out that it's your fault, you know, or you didn't do this, you didn't do that. The railroad teaches us to do what's right, and that's what the whole story is, what's right. And so anyway, that is the end of that story. Now there's one other one, I'll make it very brief. Let me put it right on there. And I'm going I'm going west at Burbank. We pick up a message. Be on lookout for a mail bag on right-of-way between mileposts 416 or something. In other words, between Oxnard and Somas. Be on lookout for a mail bag. And evidently, they lost the mail bag out of a baggage car, out of a mail car. So this come out, and I, you know, so we looked. I didn't see anything. So about 2 weeks go by. Don't have any more messages. I figured, well, you know. And all of a sudden, I'm cruising along, coming up the coast again, to BI. And I looked over there, over in the canal. It was about 200 feet or something like that. Over there, the ditch, irrigation ditch, that's what I call a canal. And cattails growing all around. Well, the cattails died out, I guess, in a couple of weeks. And I looked over there, and it looked like something was like at an angle. So I thought about it, didn't say anything to anybody. So I made a round trip, and I come home. I got home early. I told the wife, I said, would you like to go for a ride? I said, I know a good burrito place over there in Somas. So I said, she says, yeah, let's go. I didn't tell her what I was up to until after we was out on the road, and it's an early afternoon. And so anyway, I told her about this message, and I says, I got it in my bag somewhere, I don't know. Anyway, so we went down the line. I kept looking over about the location, and all of a sudden I had it pretty well figured out. So I stopped the car. I said, wait here. I crossed over the main line, walked across the ditch, and I walk up on this levee, irrigation ditch they had, and sure as hell, I looked over there, and this thing cartwheeled. That's why it got so far over there. It cartwheeled all the way over into the ditch, and it's laying at an angle. If you looked at it just right, you could see it. Otherwise, you didn't see it. Well, now that's a good one. So I pick it up, and I put it in the car, and I said, well, let's go get a bite to eat, and we'll go home. Well, we got home about 9, 10 o'clock at night. I said, I'm going to make one stop. So I went by the yard office and see if George DeLellis was there, or his representative. Now, he was the terminal superintendent. And nobody there. But the offices are all open, you just walk in. So I walked in and I looked around, nobody around. So the front door of the yard office was locked. So I walked around, I kicked the kicker, and so that I could open it from the outside. So then I went around, got in my car, and I drove around the yard office to the front door. Got the mail bag out in the back seat, because I don't want to answer any questions. You learn that fast. You're only as smart as I'm dumb enough to tell you. And that's an engineer's ritual, because you sit deep in the seat. You're responsible for everything. So I sneaked in the yard office, and there's his office. I had the bag up on my side, and I made a quick move, and I come around behind his desk and threw the mail bag under his desk, where he was going to have his feet on it before he did anything. And then I got out of there, and I closed the door. No, nothing. It's his baby. So when he got there, he told me later, with a few added words, that he didn't like what I did. I said, that's not your call. It's not your call what you like. I said, what do you think of what I like? With the United States government mail, and this was all registered? I said, what do you think I'm doing? You put the message out, and I showed him the message. I said, here's the message. So I said, what's going on, George? Anyway, I said, what did you do with it? Or don't you want to tell me? Never mind, I said, I don't want to know what you did with it. He says, I'll tell you what I did. I put it in my car as soon as I got here, and he says, I drove to the main post office and drove by the post deck and just threw it up on the deck and got my ass out of there. And he says, I said, well, then you did 100%, George. I said, did you hear anything? He said, not a word. He had a big smile on his face. I said, George, you're just like me, not a word. And I kept my mouth shut on that one for a long time, because I didn't want no federal smart boys asking me any questions. But that's a true story. God help me. And that shows you how we think, how we operate, and that's about it.
Okay, well, thank you very much.